Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Overthinker's Guide to Love. It's Elena, and I'm so glad you're here today. After last week's episode about why we overthink relationships, I kept thinking about the question underneath all of them. Why do some people overthink every text message while someone else barely gives it a second thought? Why do some people panic when they feel someone is pulling away while others are the ones creating the distance? Why do we all seem to experience relationships so differently? A lot of that comes back to something called attachment. And if you spend any time on social media recently, you've probably heard people say things like, I'm anxiously attached or he's avoidant. It feels like everyone is trying to figure out their attachment style. And earlier this week, I posted on Instagram stories asking y'all, what do you want to see the next episode? And by and I'm like 90% of people voted for what is my attachment style. And while I think it's amazing that attachment theory has become more mainstream, I also think it's become oversimplified a lot. People have turned it into labels. I'm anxious, I'm avoidant, I'm secure, almost like it's a personality test. But attachment is so much deeper than that. It's not about whether you text back quickly. It's not about whether you need reassurance constantly, and it's definitely not an excuse for treating people poorly. Attachment is really about beliefs your brain has developed about love, relationships, and emotional security or emotional safety. It's a lens through which you experience connection. So today I want to answer two questions. What is your attachment style, really? And can it actually change? Let's start with something I think a lot of people wonder. Are we born this way? The answer is kind of. We're all born with different temperaments. Some babies are naturally more sensitive, some are more conscious, some adapt to change easily. That's the simple part of who we are. But attachment itself isn't something we're born with. Attachment develops through experiences. From the moment we're born, our brains are constantly collecting information. When I cry, does someone come? When I'm scared, does someone comfort me? When I need help, does someone notice? Are the people around me predictable? Can I trust them? Is it okay for me to need other people? As children, we aren't consciously asking those questions. Our brains are answering them through thousands of everyday experiences. Every hug, every goodbye, every moment of comfort, every moment of disappointment, every repair after conflict, every time someone showed up or didn't. Over time, our brain begins creating what psychologists call internal working models. Basically, they're stories we develop about ourselves and other people. Stories like, I'm worthy of love, people can be trusted, or maybe I have to work really hard to keep people close. If I depend on people, I'll probably get hurt. My needs are too much. The tricky part is that most of us don't even realize we're carrying these beliefs. We don't walk around thinking about them consistently or consciously. Instead, we feel them. We experience them as anxiety, as distance, as fear, as overthinking, as shutting down. So, let's talk about the four attachment styles, not as labels, as different way people learn to stay emotionally safe. Let's start with secure attachment. I think people imagine securely attached people as these perfect, calm humans who never get jealous, never overthink, and always communicate perfectly. And that's not true. Securely attached people still get hurt. They still have bad days. They still get anxious sometimes. The difference is that their foundation is different. At their core, they genuinely believe that they are worthy of love and that relationships are safe enough. If someone takes longer to respond than usual, they don't automatically assume the relationship is falling apart. If there's conflict, they don't immediately think it's over. They can communicate their needs without feeling guilty. They can respect someone's boundaries without taking them personally. And if a relationship ends while it absolutely hurts, they trust that eventually they'll be okay. And I think that's what security really is, not the absence of fear, but the confidence that you'll be okay even when relationships feel uncertain. Now let's talk about anxious attachment. I think anxious attachment gets misunderstood more than almost any other attachment style. People use words like clingy or needy. I don't think those words tell the whole story. Most people with anxious attachment don't want constant reassurance because they're dramatic. They want reassurance because somewhere along the way, their brain learned that connection wasn't always guaranteed. Maybe love felt inconsistent. Maybe affection came and went. Maybe a parent was emotionally unavailable. Maybe there was a divorce. Maybe someone important left. Maybe emotions weren't always responded to. The specific experience is different for everyone, but the lesson often sounds similar. I don't know if people will stay. So the brain adapts. It becomes incredibly sensitive to signs of disconnection. A shorter text message, a different tone of voice, someone canceling plans, a little less affection than usual. Things that someone else might barely notice suddenly feels huge because the anxious brain isn't just reacting to what happened, it's reacting to what it thinks might happen next. They're losing interest, they're pulling away. I need to fix this before I lose them. That's why overthinking happens. Just like how we talked about last episode, it's actually a form of protection. Your brain is trying to solve the problem before the pain ever arrives. The problem is sometimes there actually isn't a problem. Our brains become so focused on preventing rejection that we accidentally create more anxiety than the situation ever called for. Then we have avoidant attachment. This one also gets misunderstood a lot too. And I think these anxious attachment and avoidant attachment we see a lot of, at least I see a lot of on TikTok. And they're a little bit crazy things people are saying about them. But this one also gets misunderstood. People often think avoidant attachment people don't care. I see that a lot on TikTok. But that's usually not true. Many of them care deeply. They just learned that depending on other people doesn't always feel safe. Maybe they had become independent at a young age. Maybe expressing emotions wasn't encouraged. Maybe they learned that vulnerability led to disappointment. So their brain creates a different survival strategy. If I don't need anyone, I can't be hurt by anyone. That's why closeness can sometimes feel uncomfortable. Not because they don't want love, but because love can feel vulnerable. And vulnerability can feel risky. You might notice someone with an avoidant attachment style pulling away after things start getting serious. They may need lots of space after emotional conversations. They may struggle to ask for help, not because they don't love the people in their lives, but because independence became their version of safety. And we we have fearful avoidant attachment, sometimes called disorganized attachment. This one I hardly ever seen ever online. Never see it ever. And when I first heard about it, they called it disorganized attachment. But when I was researching this, a lot of articles called it fearful avoidant attachment. So you can either call it fearful, you can call it disorganized, you can call it whatever you want. Well, fearful or disorganized. But this one is can feel the most confusing. Is the most confusing to understand too if you are a person that has it, because it's like wanting two completely opposite things at the same time. Part of you desperately wants closeness. Part of you is terrified of it. You crave connection, but when someone actually gets close, your nervous system starts sounding the alarm. You pull away. Then when they create distance, you miss them. So you move toward them again. It's the constant push and pull between wanting love and fearing what love could cost you. People with this attachment style often carry a deep fear of being hurt while also deeply longing for connection. It's exhausting. And if that's you, I just want you to know you're not broken. Your brain adapted to experience that felt confusing or unsafe. It learned to protect you the best way it knew how. And that brings us to the second question. Can attachment styles actually change? Yes, absolutely. And honestly, I think that's my favorite part about attachment theory. Because attachment isn't your identity, it's a pattern. And patterns can change. The human brain is incredibly adaptable. Psychologists call this neuroplasticity. Basically, our brains are constantly learning from new experiences. Every healthy friendship, every partner who communicates consistently, every boundary you learn to set, every difficult conversation that ends with understanding instead of abandonment. Those experiences slowly teach your brain something new. They challenge the old beliefs you've been carrying for years. Maybe not everyone leaves. Maybe conflict doesn't always mean rejection. Maybe your needs aren't too much. Maybe vulnerability doesn't always end in pain. Healing isn't about becoming a different person. It's about helping your nervous system realize it doesn't have to stay in survival mode forever. And that's not something that happens overnight, sadly. It happens little by little, one safe relationship at a time, one healthy conversation at a time, one moment where you choose curiosity over fear. So, before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one thought. Maybe attachment style isn't the most important thing about you. Maybe what's important is understanding why you became the way you are. Because when we understand our patterns, we stop judging ourselves for them. We stop asking, what's wrong with me? And we start asking, what happened to me? What did my experience teach me? And are those lessons still serving me today? Your attachment style is not a life sentence. It's a starting point. It's a map, not your destination. So this week, instead of asking yourself, what's my what's my attachment style? Try asking yourself, what is my attachment style trying to protect me from? I think the answer to that question might teach you more than any quiz ever could. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. If this episode made you think of someone, send it to them. You never know who might need to hear that they're not broken, they're just human. Until next time, be curious with your mind and gentle with your heart. Bye, guys.